I know I need to be following up, but I don't know how to do it in a way that doesn't seem like I'm begging for business. They don't want to feel like they are overly salesy, spammy, which is totally fair. They want to follow up and they want to touch base, but they want to do it in a way that feels as if they're serving, they're making a deposit. What you are doing is not helping when you're saying this is not going to last long. Because you're probably right. If it's a great property, it probably won't last long, but they're not wondering how long it's going to last or how long they can sleep on it. They're still stuck on whether or not it's the right home for them to start with. I'm just checking in. How are things? And you're kind of like beating around the bush because you don't want to ask the question that you know you need to ask, which is, are we buying a house or not? Right? Are you selling your house or not? Because you don't want to come out and say it. So instead, when you're saying, hey, just checking in, you're being very coy, you're kind of wasting their time. Like, do you have a point or not? And so instead of just checking in, say this. If you have found your way here, you are a real estate pro who's ready to transition from chasing leads to getting dream clients to chase you. This podcast is where you will learn the business and systems strategies you need to grow your real estate business so that you can get paid consistently, connect with dream clients, and keep your sanity. Hey friend, welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to talk about follow-up. Follow-up is one of the most important systems in a real estate business, of course. And if you don't have great follow-up, you're not going to close great clients. That is just my belief at this point after iterating my own follow-up systems for the last nearly 10 years in this business. And I have had really poor follow-up times at times and really good follow-up at times. And what it really comes down to, in my opinion, is just being really intentional about how we're following up with clients. Now, I want to walk through in this conversation some really simple swaps that you can make to your follow-up to increase the likelihood that somebody is going to get back to you. Okay? Because here's what happens with a lot of real estate agents when I coach them on their follow-up. This is like obviously something that we talk about all the time in the Market Authority Academy. In fact, we have nearly an entire module in our curriculum on follow-up, and we dedicate a coaching call every month to really great follow-up, which is our objection handling coaching calls. And a lot of times the objections that I'm hearing from the agents that I coach is one of two things. I don't know what to say is a big one. They say, well, I don't know what to say, and because I don't know what to say, I overthink it. And then I spend so much time like binging all these videos on YouTube. And then by the time I go to actually say it, I've lost my nerve or I've run out of time to work for that day. Other real estate agents might say something to the effect of, I know I need to be following up, but I don't know how to do it in a way that doesn't seem like I'm begging for business, which I can totally relate to. They don't want to feel like they are overly salesy, spammy, which is totally fair. They want to follow up and they want to touch base, but they want to do it in a way that feels as if they're serving, they're making a deposit, not making an ask. And so because of that, it's really difficult for them to follow up with leads, especially if they're further out. If they're those leads who are like, oh, I'm looking next year, or, oh, I'm ready to look at houses in the next 6 months. So what I actually did recently was I put together a no-fail follow-up guide and added it to the Market Authority shop. I cannot tell you how much positive feedback I have gotten on this guide. I have had so many of you saying that this was absolutely helpful and became a daily reference tool for you because I put a couple of really cool things in there. And one of the things that I put in there was a list of 30 conversation starters with all kinds of different scenarios. So how to open the conversation in a natural way that doesn't feel just kind of like weird and awkward, which interestingly so is what holds a lot of real estate agents back from even beginning to follow up. And so what I want to do is walk through just like 2 or 3 quick follow-up scripts that you can begin implementing today to get back in touch with clients who maybe you've lost track with, or make sure that you are continuing the conversation in a constructive way. Because if we are going to provide an amazing client experience, if we're going to back up our brand, and if we're saying we're really great communicators and we're sharing amazing service with our clients, part of that is follow-up. Like we have to have really good follow-up to do that well, right? So let's talk about that really quick. I first want to give you a step that you can take when you are following up. So to avoid any common like weird lags you have in communication where you're not in contact, what you want to do is from the very first interaction is always leave the conversation off with next steps. So I never would leave a conversation with a client with something along the lines of, well, you let me know when you're ready. They're not hiring us to just be there to facilitate a transaction and open a door. Okay. They're hiring us to provide guidance through the entire homeownership journey. I know what the next step is. I know when they need to be reaching out to me. So I need to clearly explain that to them. So along those veins, like, don't ever leave yourself in a situation to where getting back in touch is awkward. You really need to leave the conversation with clear next steps so that you have something to pick up off of, right? So instead of saying, hey, just checking in, you're saying, hey, last we spoke, this is where we were. And that's going to be my first swap for you. Okay. So, and again, I go so far into detail on this in the no fail follow-up guide, because like it's an actual conversation that you need to learn how to have. But for this podcast purposes, I'm going to give you the quick tip because you can start doing this today. And in fact, I challenge you to go in through your CRM or go in through your email and find somebody that you have kind of maybe not dropped the ball with, but haven't spoken to in a couple of weeks. And this is what you're going to do. Your first swap is for just checking in. So you might be in those situations where you're like, oh, I'm just checking in. How are things? And you're kind of like beating around the bush because you don't want to ask the question that you know you need to ask, which is, are we buying a house or not? Right? Are you selling your house or not? You're kind of like beating around the bush because you don't want to come out and say it. So instead, when you're saying, hey, just checking in, you're being very coy and you're kind of wasting their time. Like, do you have a point or not? And so instead of just checking in, say this. Say, hey, last we spoke, this was the situation. Is that still the case? That's all you need to do to open up a constructive conversation, right? So let's run through a couple of scenarios and what that sounds like. Let's say this was a client who had just signed a new lease, but they know this is it. This is the last time they're renting, and in the next 12 months, they are going to purchase a home. And you say, cool, I'm going to be here when you're ready. Yikes. And so you need to get back in touch with them. It's been a couple of months, and in the back of your mind, you're thinking, they should really probably talk to a lender and make sure they have their financials, like their ducks in a row, so that they are going to be prepared to purchase a home and move in by the time their lease ends. So the script swap is, instead of, hey, just checking in, how's your rental, or whatever you would say, you're going to say, hey, I hope you're doing well. Last we spoke, you had just moved into that rental. Hope you're loving it, by the way. But you were planning on being ready to purchase before your lease ends. Just wanted to check. Is that still the case? Is that still where your mind was at? Open-ended question. It prompts a response. So they're going to come back to you and say something to the effect of yes and or no because. And then you can actually start the conversation to help lead next steps. How much better does that feel instead of just checking in? Another scenario might be a seller who's looking to list. Okay. This might be a seller who reached out to you and said, here's one that I got recently. I'm looking to relocate. Right now we live in Seattle because we moved here. As you know, you sold our house in Phoenix, so we moved to Seattle. And we're thinking of moving back to Phoenix. We need to get some ducks in a row to get there. And so once we have an idea of when this is going to happen, we're going to reach out to you because we need some help buying a house back in Phoenix. That was kind of the conversation. If I were to reach out to them a week after that conversation, instead of saying, hey, just checking in, how's it going in Seattle? I would say, hey, last we spoke, you were planning on getting a sure date on when that relocation might be in effect. Wanted to see if that was still the case or if you have that date in mind. That's it. They are going to share their next steps with you. You have now opened a dialogue to where you can create an action plan for them. Now, if their response at that point was something to the effect of, you know what, we just heard from work, they have approved my relocation, they want me back in the office by September. If that was the case, I would say something to the effect of, way to go, you guys. It's time to get to work. September is going to come up fast. We got a lot to do. Let's hop on a Zoom call so I can provide you with an action plan and we can begin next steps. How good does that feel, right? So that's your first swap. Just checking in. Instead of that, it's last we spoke, okay? Okay, so let's talk about our next follow-up swap. And this one I had already kind of alluded to a couple of times, and it's let me know when you're ready to go looking for houses. Now, this one tends to come up oftentimes when your client knows that something's going to happen, that they need to buy a house, but they're not sure where, they're not sure what they can afford, they're not sure when. And so they say, we're not quite ready, we'll let you know when we're ready. And so what you're kind of stuck with is, well, let me know when you're ready, right? And then you just kind of like fade away because you don't want to bother them. Instead, what you want to say in leaving the conversation is, when you're ready, I'll be here to guide you through next steps. Allows you to touch base to see if they're ready in a way that's actually constructive, right? Because then guess what the next follow-up is? Instead of just checking in, you're saying, hey, last we spoke, you weren't quite sure on the timing for your home purchase. Is that still the case? We're leaning back on the first follow-up swap, right? Do you see how these all kind of play together? Now, this right here is exactly why I'm not a big fan of heavily structured email templates and scripts that box you in on just providing information. You see how this follow-up changes from providing information and over-educating and just heaping on what we think is value, but is actually very overwhelming to them, and instead zooms in on one detail that we can help activate them to get over to make a move with, right? That is a really important part of no-fail follow-up. It's getting away from over-educating, which they don't need because they have the same Google that you do, but instead walking them through the action steps. So I'm going to reiterate the two follow-up swaps that we've spoken about. Instead of just checking in, it's last we spoke. And instead of let me know when you're ready, it's I'll be here when you're ready to guide you through next steps. Does that not already feel more empowering and more comfortable? It absolutely should. Okay, so the next follow-up and the last follow-up swap that I want to give you, because again, there's a whole bank of these in the no-fail follow-up guide. If you need more, you can go grab that, but you can start with these today, like I'm saying. The last one that I want to give you is when you're trying to activate your buyer to choose the house, right? Have you ever been in a situation where your clients are really having trouble choosing a home that's right for them? And you know the market really well because you're staring at that dang MLS every single day. Like, you know all about the listings popping on and off the market. And your client is really having a hard time making a decision because, maybe they're overanalyzing it. They're overwhelmed with the decision itself. All things are totally understandable. Our job is to help them navigate that. And so what a lot of real estate agents do in this situation is they say something to the effect of, let's do this. Like, this is a great deal. This property won't last long. What you're doing is not helping when you're saying this is not going to last long. Because you're probably right. If it's a great property, it probably won't last long, but they're not wondering how long it's going to last or how long they can sleep on it. They're still stuck on whether or not it's the right home for them to start with. They're not ready to write an offer yet because they're not sure whether or not it's the one. So just pressing in urgency and saying this isn't going to last long, the market's really hot, like that's not helping. And in fact, that's going to actually damage the trust that they have with you. So instead of this won't last long, here's what I want you to do instead. You're going to think back to their wish list, right? You're going to think back to what's most important to them in this move and their timing and where they are in this process of buying a home, because you did have that buyer consultation with them, right? So you should know as much of their thinking space of this process as possible. And so instead of saying this is a hot property or this won't last long, what I want you to say instead is, let me share with you, if I can, about what stands out to me about this home, or what stands out to me about this deal. Get specific on why this is something they might want to apply some urgency to. And not just because it's got a great kitchen, not just because it's in a great location, but because of how it aligns to their needs. So let's say you're working with an individual who's looking for their first home, and they've got the down payment, they're ready to take on this investment, but maybe they're analytical thinkers and they really want to make sure that they get this done right. Or maybe they've got their parents in their ear talking about how expensive real estate is, and in my day, And so instead, what we want to do is bring them down to earth and help them activate their logical thinking brain. You can't do that if you're saying, this is a great deal. So instead, when you say something to the effect of, here's what stands out to me about this opportunity, you have the opportunity to help them remember why they started this process and remember why it is they're looking to buy. You can say something to the effect of, when you were telling me how important it was for you to purchase a home, you really told me how you envisioned having Christmas morning with your future family and where the Christmas tree would go. And I'm looking at this home, and this is like the perfect gathering space that you guys can grow into. I'm imagining this Christmas tree beautifully decorated in the corner. I'm imagining you guys here. And what's super cool about that is this home is still $50K below budget on some of the other ones that you've looked at that are similar. And what's even better is you told me how important it was that we were in this school district. You guys can walk to the elementary school in the neighborhood. And for your spouse who has to commute to work every day, look at how close we still are to the freeway. You're 15 minutes from work, right? Like you can take a moment to actually get really specific, only if you ask for permission. So I think that in my situation, if I were to really want to nail this down and really show them that I'm on their team, because I am, that's so important to me that they feel like we're on the same team, I'm going to say, instead of, again, this is the swap, instead of, this is a great deal, or this won't last long, you're saying, can I share with you why I think this is a great opportunity? Okay, here's why I think it's a really great deal. And then just list all of the things that it's checking off for them and help them look at it in a really logical way so that they can stamp down that fear-speaking brain a little bit that happens naturally. That's just, we're human. When we're making a big decision, our brains are not looking for reasons why we should do it. Our brains are looking for reasons why we should not. We are a self-protective species. And so that is why this is such an important swap. So again, what we're going to do always is say, can I share what stands out to me about this deal? Or let me share what stands out to me about this opportunity. Now you guys are back on the same page, right? How cool is that? So I want you to start thinking about your follow-up in terms of, instead of just adding more information or more noise or just like quote unquote staying top of mind, how can we activate our clients to make a move? If that's what's right for them, how can we activate them to get unstuck? I, for one, have had a lot of clients who have not been able to get unstuck, and it has cost them a lot of money because they hesitated when they shouldn't have. Now, that's still their choice to make. They are human beings, but if I'm not providing them all of the opportunities to make a move when it is in their benefit or when they can really do something with that, then I'm not doing my job. And so I want you to think of follow-up in that way. Check out the no-fail follow-up guide in the Market Authority shop. I'll have the details if you want to look at that. But if you found this helpful, I will continue to do different examples like this to show you how follow-up can feel very effective, but also very genuine, very down-to-earth, and very helpful. Please let me know if you found this conversation helpful. I love having conversations on the Market Authority show like this. So if this was one of your favorites, then I need to hear from you. Reach out to me on Instagram, send me a direct message with your thoughts, or if you're watching this on YouTube, leave me a comment on the comments of this video. I love seeing what you guys are thinking of when we're having these conversations. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, keep on crushing it.